We are going to get started with our panel discussion. Just a couple announcements. We have partnered with the Book Bin in Northbrook. So I will put a link in the chat. So if you're interested in buying any of the wonderful books on these authors, you can do so. I will do that once we get started. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce these four ladies. So first we have Victoria Thompson. Victoria had really exciting news this week because her latest book, Murder on Wall Street, came out 2 days ago. So this is a great week. Victoria, or Vicky, is a USA Today best-selling author. She has received many acknowledgments for her work, including multiple nominations for the Edgar and Agatha Award for her Gaslight Mystery series, and the Sue Grafton Memorial Award for her Counterfeit Lady series. And those awards are all just kind of recognizing excellent work in the genre. And then we have Erica Neubauer. Erica's latest book is Murder at Wedgefield Manor, and that was out just a few weeks ago, the end of March. So congratulations on that. And Erica has an interesting background. She spent many years in the military. She worked as a police officer and a high school English teacher, and then eventually found her way to become a writer. And she's also reviewed mysteries and crime fiction for many publications, such as Publishers Weekly and Los Angeles Review of Books. And then we have Ashley Weaver, who's joining us from Louisiana tonight. Hi, Ashley. And Ashley's book, latest book, is A Peculiar Combination. It comes out in a couple weeks, May 11th, I believe.
It's actually been pushed back to May 25th, so a couple extra weeks.
Okay, mark your calendar, May 25th. And Ashley is also an Edgar-nominated author and is widely known for her Amory Ames Mysteries and Electra McDonald series. And then finally, we have Susanna, or Susie Calkins. She's going to be moderating our discussion tonight, and I will turn things over to her shortly. Her award-winning series include the Lucy Campion Mysteries and Speakeasy Mysteries. Her most recent book came from the Lucy Campion series, which you'll find in the link. It's coming out in paperback this summer, so you can see the link to that when I put that in there. And it's called The Sign of the Gallows. It came out in early 2020 and earlier this year, but paperback's coming shortly. And Susie holds a PhD in history, which I have to imagine has been a real asset with writing historical mystery books. So I'd be curious to hear how that kind of helps her. So these are the four women and authors you're going to hear from tonight. And once the conversation starts, I'm going to turn off my camera and my microphone, and then I'll kind of come back at the end. So I'm going to turn things over to Susie. So welcome.
Great, thanks. So fun to be here with everybody. Just to add on to what Roz just said, if you do have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and also say hello and say maybe where you're coming from. It's always fun for us to know where you're coming from. And anyway, so welcome everybody. I just wanted to start with a kind of a quick question, and I want you to kind of explain a little bit about what your series are and what time period they're set in, and then your most recent book, a little bit about how that fits in with your series. Not too much all in one big question, right? So maybe Vicki, let's start with you, and then Erica, and then Ashley.
Okay. The Gaslight Mystery series is now 24 books long. The newest book is Murder on Wall Street, which just came out, as Roz said, 2 days ago. And this series is set in turn of the century New York City. The heroine is a midwife and the hero is a detective. He starts out as a police detective, and after 24 books, they've sort of evolved. And when they meet in the first book, they don't like each other. She's a midwife and he's a police officer, and they don't like each other very much. By the end of the first book, they've sort of learn to respect each other, and after a few more books they fall in love, but they can never get married because she's the daughter of a wealthy society family in New York City, and he's an Irish Catholic police officer. So it took me 15 books to figure out how to get them married. So I finally did get them married. And Frank has come into a lot of money, so he no longer works as a police officer, but he has his own private detective agency. And
Vicki, excuse me, I'm getting a note for people saying you need to speak up a little bit. They're having a little trouble hearing you.
Okay, is that better? I hope.
Yeah, it's good. Thanks.
Okay, so So the new book features Blackjack Robinson, and I knew he was going to be fun when I got my revision letter for. He first appeared in Murder in the Bowery, and when I got my revision letter for that, my editor said, "Are we going to see more of Jack?" And I thought, okay, I hadn't really planned on it, but let's think about that. So he's appeared now. This is the third book he's appeared in. In the second book he appeared in, Sarah, my heroine, finds him a bride, plays matchmaker, and gets him married. And by this time, the woman he married had been raped, and the man who raped her has been murdered in Murder on Wall Street. And Jack is terrified that he's going to be blamed for this, accused of this murder, and it will ruin his wife's reputation. So he calls on Frank to help him find the real killer so that he can save his wife from scandal.
Okay,
so that's
great.
what Murder on Wall Street is about.
Awesome. Well, we'll come back to some of those points there, I think, a little bit. Now I've forgotten if I said Ashley next or Erica. Yeah, go ahead, Ashley. Yeah. Or did I totally switch you guys?
Ashley, you go.
You want me to go?
You go.
Okay. I write the Amory Ames series, which is set in the 1930s in England, and it's about a wealthy society woman and her husband who have kind of a contentious relationship to start out with. And so throughout the series, they're sort of working on resolving their issues as well as solving crimes. And so the latest book in the series is A Deception at Thorncrest, which finds them back at their home, their country house. And there's a local kind of festival fair thing coming up, and some surprises from the family. Of course, I don't want to give too much away, but they find a mystery at home this time. And then, as Roz mentioned, my next book, A Peculiar Combination, comes out May 25th. And it's the first book in a new series about a woman named Electra McDonald, who goes by Ellie. And she's a safecracker who gets pulled into the military intelligence sort of game when she's captured, and she's given the chance between helping retrieve some sensitive documents from a safe or go to jail. So of course she wants to do her part for the war effort and avoid jail. So she kind of gets pulled into that.
Awesome. I'm so excited to know you have this new series. I was like, what? So this is fun. And Erica, tell us about your books, and especially the most recent one.
Yes, well, there's only two.
Yeah.
So the first one is Murder at the Meena House, and it's set in 1920s Egypt. My protagonist is Jane Wonderly, and for the first book, she and her aunt are traveling to Egypt, and she gets basically accused of murder and needs to clear her own name with the help of the mysterious Mr. Redvers, because I like a little romance. So then the second book, Murder at Wedgefield Manor, which just came out, is set at an English country. It's an English manor house mystery. So Mr. Redvers does appear again, but this time one of the servants on the estate, who is a veteran of the First World War, is killed. And so Jane's gonna look into it again.
Awesome. Yeah, one of the things I'm always interested in is how do people pick their time periods? You know, like why does something capture your imagination? And and I'm just curious, like for all three of you, when you thought about your time periods, like why did you pick the ones that you did? And I don't know, Erica, if you want to start that one, but.
Sure. For me, it's because I was raised on so much Agatha Christie and Masterpiece Mystery and all those old black and white movies. And somewhere along the way, I picked up really, really romantic ideas about Egypt in the 1920s specifically. It's that whole, like, people very elegantly dressed with like the slow moving fans overhead, and then somebody's dead in the corner. And so when I decided to try to write a book, there was no question that that's exactly what I wanted to do it. Plus the 20s really lends itself to, like, it's a fun period. There's a lot of really interesting social things happening, and then prohibition back in the States. And I don't know, 20s are fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm wearing I always like to, when I do events with Erica, I'm wearing my little Egyptian kitty cat, which she gave me when she was traveling to Egypt. I want to ask you about being at the Meena house. We'll talk about that in a bit, but yeah, Ashley or Vicky, I mean, how did you guys choose those time periods? And Ashley, you had the 30s, and now, actually, I'm not sure exactly when your new book is set, but it's that, right after the Great War. No, that's, yeah. How'd you pick that
Right at
one
the
here?
beginning of World War II.
Yeah, that's right. And how did you pick those time periods?
Well, similar to Erica, I always grew up reading, Agatha Christie and watching all those old movies and a lot of, everything British. I just loved it. And so when I decided I wanted to write this story, I kind of automatically knew what time period it was going to be set in, and I could picture everything, like who my heroine was. And I just sort of like I always thought the 1930s is interesting, that, interwar period where you've got sort of you're moving towards being more modern from the old century, but also there's still kind of those strictures and social niceties that have to be observed. So I thought that's something interesting to play with. And then for the new series, I got on a World War II kick, and I had been reading a bunch of World War II books. And so then I actually read one by Ben Mcintyre, who has a lot of really great World War II books. And he had a man who was a petty thief, and he was arrested. He was in jail on the Channel Islands, which were occupied by the Germans. And the Germans said they would let him out of prison if he spied on the British. So he said, okay, they got him out of prison, trained him to be a German spy, parachuted him into England, and then he went right to the government and said, do you want me to be a double agent? That book is called Agent Zigzag. It's really awesome, but I like the idea of somebody who normally would not be the hero of the story becoming the hero of the story.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's just really fun. I mean, that's some fun. I mean, that's something I always kind of wonder about, like what triggers someone to like pick something, and it's really interesting. And Vicki, I don't know, you actually have multiple series. I mean, you mentioned, how many mysteries you have, but how many? You have actually quite a few more books than that.
Yeah, I have 2 series, and the Gaslight series was actually kind of a gift to me. Berkeley was looking for someone to write a series set in turn of the century New York City, where the heroine was a midwife. And I was sort of recruited to write that series. And so the time period was chosen for me, but they just said turn of the century. So I did a little research to try to figure out exactly when the series should start. And I chose 1896, because Teddy Roosevelt was the police commissioner then. And there were just a lot of really interesting things going on. And I thought, oh, that'd be fun to put Teddy in the book and have him really be in there for a good reason. So that's why I picked that particular time period. And it's turned out to be wonderful, because at that time, the social issues that people were concerned about are the same exact issues people are concerned about today. And the book I'm writing right now, set in 1900, it's should we use gasoline powered cars or electric cars? I mean, seriously, that's what people are talking about. So it's just really interesting to see how many issues I could deal with that are modern issues in a historical setting. So that's really fun. My other series is the Counterfeit Lady series, and it is starts in 1917, but it involves the women's suffrage movement. And so that was why I chose it. 1917 was a big year for the women's suffrage movement. That was the year that they demonstrated outside the White House every single day, didn't miss a single day in 1917. And President Wilson finally threw them in prison for sentenced them to 3 months of hard labor in a workhouse, thinking that would end the women's suffrage movement, but he got fooled. So.
A good thing. And I'm curious, that's always a question I have is, like how much of social or cultural or gender kinds of trends or issues that you might bring into your writing. I mean, how important is that for any of you, all of you, to think about like the larger context that goes beyond your story? Or do you think, is it okay to just sort of focus on my story, and maybe I'm not going to bring in so much of the larger social cultural trends that are political that might be happening? And I'm just curious, where do you all fall on that?
I don't know. I think that's what makes historical so interesting to people, is to see, to find out why we do things the way we do nowadays, that there's a historical reason somewhere in the dark distant past, and the past is like a foreign country. They do things differently there. And it's a mysterious, just setting something in the past, even in New York City, it's a different time and place. People were different, and things were different, and people love seeing that. And I think they love learning about it. And when I do my research, I read and read and read until I come across something that makes me say, wow, I didn't know that. Because if I didn't know it, you didn't know it either. You're going to be just as excited as I was when I read it.
I don't know, Erica, Ashley, I mean, how do you think about, like, do you try to bring in, kind of the bigger issues of context, or not so much, and that's okay? I mean, just where do you fall on that?
I have, for each book, I kind of have picked one thing that kind of was a social issue that was important to me, and then kind of tried to weave it into the background a little bit. Like the first one was like highlighting the fact that she comes from a background of domestic violence is a issue that's super important to me. And kind of like Vicki was saying, like things that were then, like, it wasn't that talked about, it's still not super talked about now. And book 2 was, the issue of veterans returning from war. And I can't think of what it is for book 3, but I know I picked something.
Sure. Yeah. And Ashley, how do you think about these kinds of things in your writing?
I usually try, kind of, as I'm writing, things that work themselves into the plot. I like your idea, Erica, of picking a kind of a topic to kind of weave in. I've never thought really of doing that. Mine's more, I kind of set the story and go, and then as things develop, I sort of try to weave in what I can in a way that fits historically with the story.
And do you find, I mean, something that Vicki had actually mentioned a minute ago about sort of like finding a hook. I mean, this isn't, sometimes, authors sort of dread the question of where did you get your ideas? And then we say like aisle 9 of, the grocery store. But the reality is, like, these ideas come to us from all different places. And I'm curious, because I've realized with my own writing that sometimes I am more intrigued by like an object. And sometimes it's more like a question. Why did people do X, Y, and Z? And then that sort of becomes like a hook for my story. And I'm just so curious, I mean, I don't know, Ashley, like when you think about even the most recent books, but like, is there like a hook that tends to inspire you, or like, how do you think about the whole story?
For each individual book?
Yeah. Or like, do you have, I mean, is it like something like, I would really like maybe when you're thinking about the mystery, is it like something what made that sort of click for you? Do you have a sense of that? Or like, is there something that hooks you together with it?
I'm usually, but I can't really, I don't write my books. I don't outline. I don't write my books in order. I write like about 50,000 words of jumbly scenes and then like rearrange them.
Ooh, just my kind of person.
So normally there comes a moment when when I know what I've already written, I've got, the different people and kind of their, maybe motives and, sort of the different things like that. So then I try and think, how can I fit this together in a different way? And then usually there's that moment where it kind of all clicks together. So I'm a disorganized writer, but it usually manages to kind of somehow come together in the end.
Yeah, it comes together great. Always love hearing that. I don't know. How about the others of you? I mean, do you start with sort of an idea? Although I really want to take credit for Vicki's, like, not the most recent book, because I gave her a thought about a milk war. And so I feel like that. Okay, tell about how I influenced your book, Vicki. No, just kidding.
Yes, and I dedicated that book to her in gratitude, because
yes, thank you.
That milk thing. How did that even? Oh, I asked the Sleuths in Time. We have a Facebook group of mystery writers, and I was looking for some idea of why somebody would steal a milk truck. Is that what it was?
No, I don't even think it was a milk truck. I think he just said, why would they have a delivery car? And I was like, well, maybe they're delivering milk, or something.
Right, yeah, like, something. And Susie suggested milk trucks would be they were carting stuff around the city secretly, and she said, oh, you could use a milk truck, and nobody would even look at it twice. And she was absolutely right. So I started researching milk, and it turned out, oh my God, there were milk wars there,
which I didn't know about. I did not know. I learned a lot. I was like, I had no idea. So that was awesome.
Incredible. So you just never know what you're gonna find. History is full of stuff.
I think that's one of those fun things, right? Like when you're reading, and maybe when you're some interesting piece of information or some story comes up, and then you're like, I got to write more about this or research more. But
that's how I felt about my thief during World War II. When I read that, I thought, oh, that would be so interesting to have.
Exactly. That's kind of what, and And then actually there was a question while you're mentioning that, Ashley, is that going to be the start of it? That's the start of a new series that,
Yes.
that new one? Yeah, I figured. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
Electra McDonald series.
Yeah, that's awesome. Someone's very excitedly asking you about that. So all three of you have kind of elements of romance in your mysteries. And so, I mean, obviously each of your books has a mystery that's solved and resolved in some way, like that's the heart of the story, right? But then these character development, the romance continues over the series. And I'm just so curious, you all three of you have a different level of how much that's at the fore, like a little more in the background. Like, how do you think about building in like the romance as a plot? And I know, Vicky, you said like it takes like what, 10 years for them to get to a kiss or something, you know?
15.
But I'm just so curious, you know, how you think about the actual like a romantic subplot, or how did you envision that? And is that something that part you enjoy, or is it like a little more like, I'm like, I don't want to do this part? And I'm just curious how you guys think about that.
Yeah, you guys go ahead.
Susie, do you really not want to write the romantic subplot?
The only reason because for my first series, I do have a love, so my Lucy Campion, I did end up putting a love triangle in, and I started feeling really bad that she was going to have to choose somebody. And so it actually just made me a little sad. Like, and every time she was with one of the characters, I felt like she was cheating on the other one. So it actually just made me feel bad. So it wasn't like I didn't enjoy the writing of the romantic part. I just
Conflicted.
I felt bad. And then like ultimately I chose one of them, and then I felt really bad about it. So yeah, I find it hard. But you guys all do it with nice finesse. And so how do you think about that? And this is me taking notes to find out for the next time what I should do.
I don't know. I tried not to make it something that was like totally at the forefront. And I definitely thought about it in a 3-book arc, and then tried to close it up in case I don't get a contract for more books, that it would have a satisfying ending at the end of the 3rd book for the romance, but could also get dragged out a little further.
I don't know, Ashley, like yours starts with kind of it's got a whole,
yeah, they're married when you're
They're already married. And when I started, I thought it'd be kind of interesting to do sort of the after the happily ever after, because, you know, a lot of stories end with, my couple, Amory and Milo, are both, you know, young, rich, good looking people, and they get, you know, fall in love and meet, and it's a whirlwind romance, and they get married. And then the book starts 5 years after the marriage, when kind of all that, you know, the honeymoon is over, and they're starting to have to, you know, deal with the repercussions of that whirlwind relationship. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing to examine in a story, is sort of what happens after two people fall in love, and how do you, you know, make things work. And so that's also kind of something that was interesting to deal with their marriage, you know, in the 1930s, because a lot of people have said, you know, I don't know why she stuck around with that guy at the beginning of the series. But,
oh,
you know,
Milo.
Yeah. He's grown on a lot of them, though. I have heard back from some of them who said he won them over. So,
That's
but yeah, it has been interesting to kind of look at that. You know, there was a big societal impact if you got a divorce in 1930s England, and it was hard to get. So that's kind of something that's sort of woven into the story too, the different options and sort of how that would impact her life. And then in my new series, Ellie so there's a little bit of kind of potential for a couple romantic relationships. She's working with, of course, a major in military intelligence, and he's very straight-laced and by the book. And of course she's not, so there's that conflict there. And then she's also got an old friend who's returned home from war that she's got a connection with. So we'll see what happens.
Wow, I can't wait to read this new series. I'm really excited about it, Ashley.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, there's people who question why she stayed with him. Did they not read the books? Really sexy.
One of my favorite things that ever happened was I was at a book signing, and there was like, you know, a couple gentlemen in the audience, and one of them asked me a question, and he said at the end, and he said, I just want to know, will we ever have the pleasure of seeing Amory investigate Milo's murder?
Oh man, that's hilarious. I'm sad.
Well, I have to tell you, when my first 20 books were historical romances. So when I switched to writing historical mysteries, everyone warned me not to put romance in my mysteries, that mystery readers do not like romance in their books. And so, you have to be very careful about that. And I'm thinking, that can't be true. I was like, no. What they might not like too much sex in the books,
Yeah.
but everybody likes a good romance.
Mhm.
So I started out with, two people who hate each other, and would normally in a historical romance, they would have been perfect for each other because they were diametrically opposed. They were complete opposites. And we all know opposites attract. So they would have eventually, by the end of the first book, they would have been together. And it was the hardest thing I ever did, was to keep them apart for that first book. And then to keep them apart for 15 more books. In all those books, they kissed once, and it was,
Oh man.
she was under the influence of a drug, and he didn't think she would remember. So he kissed her, but that was it. So he didn't kiss her till book 15 when he proposes to her, finally. But I wrote the first book, and it was plain that they were meant for each other, but they were not in love yet. And so I started getting fan mail from the first book, and people would say, "Oh, I like the book. The plot was really good. I couldn't guess who the killer was, blah, 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 blah. P.S. When are Frank and Sarah going to get together?" I thought, I may have had a winner here.
Yes.
So obviously, all the people who told me that mystery readers don't like romance were wrong.
Well, I don't want to insert myself too much here, but a reader did write to me once and gave me like an 8-paragraph email of why I should choose one of my suitors over the other. And it was like she was pulling like quotes from pages, and
That's
like,
amazing.
it was and not, but it was really, it was cool, but that was why I felt kind of bad, and I never wanted to find out how she thought how I ended up doing, because I'm not sure I picked the one she wanted. But yeah, I wanted to ask you, everybody approaches research a little bit differently. And, actually Kim Rodriguez asked a question about like, how accurate do you feel you have to be? And I'm curious about both like how you think about accuracy when you write historical mysteries, and then also, like, how do you go about your research? Are you kind of more experiential, like you want to go try the things your characters would have done, or do you like, use books, sources and things like that? I'm just curious, like how you bring authenticity, like through your research, and what kind of research you do.
I'll go.
Okay.
Awesome.
My first instinct is always to find a book. So I'm like, if I want to know about something, I'm going to see if there's a book about it. And that's how I started. So I start reading, like I've pulled a bunch of library books for starting book 4. I'm going to do a ton of research, a ton of reading. And kind of like Vicki said, like I wait until something kind of sparks, and then I'll like, oh, that's definitely going to use that. And then usually that ends up becoming, a plot points along the way somewhere. And then I also do like some YouTube, but like book 1, I wrote the entire thing before I went to Egypt. And I only had to change like 2 things when I got back. So
Amazing.
I felt pretty good about that.
Yeah.
And you have really great details about the Meena house and all of that. Yeah.
Because it's a real place. And I did feel like I had to be pretty accurate. Like I wanted to be very accurate with it, because it is a real place and you can go stay there. It's owned by the Marriott now.
No, I
It's
mean, actually,
not a Days Inn.
right? Yeah. I know that does sound a little, Marriott's classy. Ashley, how do you think? I mean, do you balance out do you do like experiential research? I mean, you are a librarian, so I know that you do a lot of reading.
I'm a librarian, so I have access to a lot of research materials. With the Amory Ames series, not so much, but with this new series, she's, I mentioned a safe cracker. And so I did buy a lock picking kit online.
Tell us more about this.
I really like, my goal was where I was going to get to be like really amazing, and I could do like demonstrations and stuff. And I never got to that point yet.
I have the same goal. I love it.
Yeah, I did have fun kind of playing around with it. And then like Erica mentioned YouTube, I watched a lot of like YouTube videos of locksmiths and things, picking locks, and kind of tried to absorb that, and then, distribute it in Ellie's own words. But it's definitely interesting because she has a skill set that I don't have. And so that's something that's kind of fun to play with.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. I love that.
Yeah, what was the question again?
Well, just like how do you how do you like bring
Oh, the research.
authenticity? And yeah, like do you do like experiential research, like you go and do something, try something, or books and things?
I'm with Erica. My first impulse is to pick up a book, and nowadays you can just go on the internet and find a YouTube video, probably on something or other that you want to see.
Mhm.
And I have books of photographs, of old photographs, just whole books that are just nothing of photographs of old New York City, which tell you so much that you could read tons of books and never know the details of, by looking at a street scene, you see what kind of hats the men were wearing and what their ties look
There's
like.
1,000 words.
Mhm.
Yeah, 1,000 words, exactly. So and I did go to New York to do research. My daughter went to NYU, and so we were up there quite a bit, and I would go to the corner where my whatever was set, and instead of what was supposed to be there'd be a department store.
Mhm.
So New York is not the way it was in 1900 anymore. So doing on the spot research isn't all that helpful.
Yeah.
So when you're doing historical research, a lot of times your best bet is to do it in a book.
Mhm.
And what I have done, though, hands-on, is I made my husband like pretend he was attacking me, or doing stuff like that to see where everybody's hands would be.
Choreograph.
Yes, choreograph a fight scene, or whatever. So he's always
That's
happy to do that.
That's hilarious. I had people at a bar trying to figure out exactly how could we drop poison into a glass with no one seeing, and how much, and do you have to stir it? Like we're all like practicing it, that's just fun.
Yeah.
So and maybe just one more about the research. Just like, do you bring in like real historical figures into your research, or like do you find that challenging? Do you do it and how? And if you don't, like why not? Is it like are you afraid like I am to bring in real historical figures? Or like how do you fall on that, like real people?
I used Teddy Roosevelt because he was the police commissioner, and it worked, and because he really was, and he really did take an active role in the police department. So having him take an active role with Frank and Sarah seemed like a perfectly normal thing to do. And I depicted him as he was historically known, and didn't make him look like a bad guy, or do anything that wouldn't have been in his character to do.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't approve of people taking real historical figures and have them doing things that they didn't do or wouldn't have done. So it's tricky, I used Emma Goldman in one of my books because she happened to be a midwife in New York City at the year that I needed that the book was set. And I thought, oh, why should I not use her?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep.
It just, if it works, it works. And I used a couple real women who were active in the women's suffrage movement in my book, but just as they were historically, they were locked in the prison too, along with my heroine. So, they were there.
So they were a little more like cameos than
they were
characters. Full. Yeah. That's kind of, And I don't know, Erica and Ashley, I'm trying to think. I didn't remember Erica and Ashley. I couldn't remember. Do you like choose not to? And why is that? No, I'm with you. Yeah.
And just I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I guess like there's never really been a occasion for my characters to encounter any historical figures specifically. There maybe would be more of one kind of in my World War II series, pulled in some military figures or something, but it's just, I feel personally like it's a big challenge and kind of tricky to manage that. So that's just not something I've done so far.
Yeah.
Same. I'm not ruling it out, but kind of like Vicky said, I'm not interested in having them do anything that they wouldn't have done. Because I don't like that. I like to be, like I said, try to be historically accurate. And it really does feel like that would be a scary challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm avoiding it right now.
Yeah. Oh, I was just, I only ever mentioned people in my first series. Like I mentioned King Charles II or, whoever, but like I don't really even have, but then in my second series, they did kind of ask me to put some cameos. So I was like, oh, it's a speakeasy. Anybody can kind of wander in. And, I was trying to I built them in, but I was a little nervous. But my new series, I'm trying to think about maybe I will bring in a real character, but it's hard. I totally agree with you guys. It is not easy to do. So I had some individual questions for each of you. So Ashley, I read an interview with you from Mystery Scene magazine where you describe having written your first full-length novel when you were in high school, which blows me away. And it was set in, I love this, Prohibition era Chicago. So I have two questions. First, like, are you ever going to do anything with that book? And two, if you are, can your protagonist and my Gina Ricci like be best friends and hang out together?
I would love that. Yeah,
I mean, I'm blown away by this idea that you wrote a full-length book when you were in high school.
I think it was my freshman year of high school. I grew up watching all these old movies, and I really like had all these phases I would go through where I would watch like all the old gangster films, like, you know, Humphrey Bogart and Edward G. Robinson and James Cagney. I had a big James Cagney phase, and so I just sort of loved that time period. And so I started writing a story. It was about a woman whose boyfriend got falsely accused and sentenced to die in the electric chair for a murder he didn't commit. And so she had to go and work with he was kind of like connected to the mob. So she had to go kind of work with his mob boss to prove his innocence and stuff. And so I would write like a few pages every night and I'd bring it, and my friends would read it at the lunch table at school. And so I'd be back and stuff. So that was kind of my first taste of writing for an audience, I guess, but it was a lot of fun. And I eventually did finish it. So I haven't looked at it in a while, but I imagine it would need a lot of work.
I'm just really impressed. I think I started multiple books and got like 10 pages in, and I was like, this is hard.
I did that too. I have a lot of unfinished stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, and then, you know, Erica, so you've held, as we actually heard in your bio, you've held many different, very interesting occupations in your life. Yes, occupations. And, you know, you were a teacher, you're a cop, a private investigator now, which I love that. Do you bring in any of those, like the things around the occupations, not necessarily like the specific skills, because they may not have had those in the time period you're writing, but like the sensibility around those, or like does that bring in or into your writing right now, or like even thinking about crime and justice, or, you know?
I haven't brought any of that, except with the exception of in this book that just came out, I put a couple of my buddies from the military that I worked with, our characters in the book.
Oh, cool.
So Chris Hammond is a real person. Mm-hmm. He was not a flyer though. He was a nurse. And then my old boss, Colonel Ward. But I had to change it all to like British military terms. So I don't remember what their ranks are in British terms.
Right.
But no, I really haven't. And mostly because those were jobs that I left for a reason, and I wanted these to be very escapist and fun. But that's not to say, especially the private investigator stuff that I'm very sporadically doing now, will probably show up in future writing.
Yeah, I think we kind of all want to we all want to read this book of, you know, although we always I joke with Erica, like I want her to write one about a really bumbling PI that's just terrible and just wants to read books all day. And then like,
we're gonna write that book, Susie. We're gonna write it together.
Yeah, we're gonna have alternating characters. We've already kind of worked this out. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I love it.
And then Vicki, also I in an interview you did last year, you mentioned that you had followed some advice. I'm just really interested in this. You followed some advice that you had heard author David Morrell say, who David Morrell had said, he advised writers to identify their dominant emotion. I'm just so interested in this. And you wrote, I was surprised to discover my dominant emotion is anger. I'm often angry because the world is not a fair place. And I'm just so curious about that. Like, how does that play out in your writing? How do you think about that? And I just love this idea of the dominant.
Well, if you've read more than one of my books, there's always like a sub theme running through it, how the world is unfair to women. And I didn't realize it for a long time, even that I was doing that, but because it's true. I mean, the world is unfair to women. It was much more unfair to women in 1900 than it is now, but still is. Enough so that women can certainly identify with Sarah when she's dealing with this prejudice against her as a woman. And interestingly enough, I just wrote an article for what is the name of the magazine? Crime Magazine, is it?
Crime
something.
scene, maybe? Or no, it's okay. Mhm.
And it just came out today, and it's about this. That I think that, and I say in the article that children have to be taught many things in order to make them capable of living in a civilized society. One thing children never have to be taught is what's fair. They seem to know that. That's like hardwired. That is not fair. If something's not fair, they know it instantly, instinctively. You know, if you're cutting a cake for children, every piece has to be exactly the same size. It has to be fair. You can't pay more attention to one of your children than the other. They know what's fair and what's not fair. And I think all people can understand that. It's something that's ingrained in the human psyche that I think we would all like for life to be fair. And we see, and I think that's the whole point of the criminal justice system, is to punish the evildoers and keep people safe, so that good people are safe and go about their business, and it's fair. But too often we see that that's not the case, and even justice doesn't necessarily accomplish that goal to make life fair. So that's actually the theme of my Counterfeit Lady series. She's a con artist, and her love interest, who eventually she does get married to, is an attorney who is so honest, he won't even tell a little white lie. You know, if you say, "Does this skirt make me look fat?" He'd say, "Yes." I mean, he's that bad. And so how do these two people get along? Well, he believes in the importance, in the rule of law. He thinks the world should be a fair place. And she points out to him through, various examples, that the world is not fair, that his justice system does not help the people who really need it. But she can, by telling her lies and running her cons, she can get justice for these people that wouldn't ordinarily get it.
That's great.
So-
Thank you. I mean, I just found that such an interesting way of even thinking. I mean, as a writer, like, oh, do we all have dominant emotions? I mean, it's just so interesting to think, and how's that playing out in our books? I don't know.
Yeah, that's why I'm angry, because the world is not fair.
Yeah, I hear you. So all your characters, although possibly not your most recent one, Ashley, Electra McDonald, but your other characters, everybody they may have been able to live during 1918 great influenza outbreak, right? Like some of them would have been a little younger. We would have had Vicky's being a little bit older. How in the world would they have dealt with the pandemic of the 1918? How would your characters, would they just be like, oh, I don't really mind being quarantined with all my sick neighbors? How would they have dealt with it? Like, think about your main protagonist. How would they have survived? Would they be still going out and about? Would they be listening to like the news saying it's fine to go to church and the movie theater, but don't go to, the park? Or, I mean, what would they be doing? It did vary. I know yours are in England, and that's true. Well, 1918, they also had it there too. Like, how would they have, how do you think your characters would have dealt with a massive pandemic, kind of like what we're experiencing now?
Well, actually, it's a minor. I mean, it's not really a spoiler, but my Electra's mother died in the pandemic.
Okay.
So she was young then. Probably, I think, I believe she was born in 1916, so she wouldn't have remembered it. But and I suppose if they'd been as they are now during that time, Amory and Milo probably would have gone to Thorncrest and sort of waited it out, I imagine.
Yeah, great. How about your characters? How would they have dealt? What would they do?
Well, I actually dealt with the 1918 flu epidemic in one of my Counterfeit Lady books, and people were, they were handing out masks on street corners to people to wear, and so people did wear masks. I'm sure it was controversial then as it is now, but many people did wear it. I've seen photographs of a baseball game, people sitting in the stands at a baseball game, everybody's wearing a mask.
That's
1918.
Yeah. I know, it's so interesting.
That was great. I was glad to see that. So, but some of my characters don't wear the masks. My heroine's father, who's a con artist, doesn't bother with a mask,
Mhm.
but Gideon wears his mask because he's very conscientious.
Mhm. And Erica, how about yours? How would they deal with it? How
Jane
did they do it?
Jane definitely would have worn a mask. I think she would have taken it as an opportunity to hunker down in her dad's place and avoid her aunt and her aunt's wanting to marry her off.
Mhm.
I think she would have, been super happy just to stay home with her books.
Mhm. Okay. So there's some questions from the audience. I'll work these in now. So let's see. So we have a question that not everybody gave their name. So anonymous attendee has said, do you have any, and this is for anybody, any comments or unique insights on the thought process behind naming characters? So how do you go about naming characters? And I like the idea of Electra.
Yeah, well, I have
why it was that I chose that name. Somebody asked me that the other day. Why did you name her Electra? And I was like, I'm not really sure. I can't really remember why, but it's a little bit of a spoiler, so I won't give it away, but kind of she's got a reason why she thinks she may have been named Electra. So that kind of comes in at the end of the book.
Mhm.
But Amory, I got in a dream. Sounds cool. But I had a dream and although I woke up and the only thing I remembered was there was a woman in it named Amory Ames. And I was like, oh, that's a good character name. So I sat down and started writing the story.
Wow. We're all like, that's so awesome. Yeah. I don't know, Redvers or Frank, how did we come up with these names?
Yeah, well, Sarah, they actually gave me the name Sarah Brandt of my heroine when they gave me the idea for the series. That was her name, and I liked it, so I kept it. Frank Malloy, it just seemed like a really Irish sounding name to me, so that's why I picked it. It wasn't O'Brien, it wasn't one that's commonly used, so I picked that. But I have a baby name book that I use for meanings. And I like to match the meaning of the name with the personality of the character that I'm naming. So that's helpful.
Mhm.
Helps you narrow it down. The other thing I use is the Social Security name index. And when I figure out how old the person is and when they would have been born, and then I go to that year and see what the top 100 baby names were. And so I get a historically accurate name, and then I look up the meaning and see if it fits.
Mhm. Yeah. And Erica, how about you?
So Jane is just a name. I knew that I wanted her first name to be Jane because I love that name. And then Wonderly, I picked up because I had recently watched The Maltese Falcon with my dad. And that's one of the names that Bridget O'Shaughnessy, it's one of the false names that she gives. Miss Wonderly. And then Redvers, I was doing the same. I was going through lists of like baby names of, in Britain in the 19 whatever, and just came across the name Redvers and was like, well, that's a fun name. I'm definitely going to use that. And then I was like, I'm going to make it where he's like Cher, where he's just going to go by that and not really use his last name at all. So it's actually his first name.
Oh, cool.
You guys make it all sound so easy, like, oh, the dream, where I was given it. I mean, I actually, all of my main characters, at least, yeah, all of them, they went through a name change. Like after a while, I was like, I don't like this name anymore. Like, doesn't it fit my characters? So I definitely changed them all. Yeah, like it's
really important to fit, because I feel like certain names have a certain like feeling to go with them. And so you have to find the one that like really clicks for your character.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Let's see. So another question from the reader bag. Laura, it said, Laura asks, did you start your series having a specific number of books or mysteries in mind? You may have to shed a little insight into how the publisher.
Yeah, well, when I started mine, they gave me a 3-book contract, and I was so excited thinking my series would be 3 books long. And I thought maybe if I'm really, really lucky, it'll be 6 books long. And now it's 24 books long. So, and I made the terrible mistake of never imagining for a moment that would happen. So I didn't make any long-term plans. And it's just sort of, I've been winging it for 24 books.
Do you write over like an arc though? Like I think in terms of 3, or just is everything single?
No. Like I said, it's very
okay.
disorganized.
I think we all appreciate that.
It's like life. It just happens.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, yeah, because usually you might get a contract for like 2 or 3 at a time. So that might, but then you don't really know if you're going to get
Right,
another
and the-
contract. And then,
The Counterfeit Lady books, they just bought them one at a time at first. And
Yeah.
so I only knew that there was going to be one more. It was very painful at first.
yeah, I don't know, Erica and Ashley, both of you had sort of, I can't remember, but like Ashley, I don't know if you were 2 and then a 2 and a 2 and a 2.
It was the Amory series. They signed me for 2, and then about a month later they came back and added 2 more.
Mhm,
And then when I finished those, I did three more.
mhm,
And then now there's 2 in the Electra series so far. So we'll see what happens after that.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, when my agent pitched it, she pitched three books, because I had the first one written, I was working on the second one, and then I had an idea for the third one, and so that's how she pitched it.
Mhm.
So I did get a 3-book deal, and then we'll see if I get more beyond this.
I only thought I was ever going to write 1 book. And then, so I put everything in the first book, all the things you're not, and then they're like, they gave me another, deal to book 1 and then another 2. And I was like, I didn't think in terms of, I'm just writing them. I didn't know if I was going to get a sequel.
I
Anyway,
do sometimes think like if I'm going to use something really good for a small plot point, like, oh, maybe I should save that later just in case I can use it for a bigger plot point.
yeah, you're right, exactly. It's good. That's good thinking, strategic. Let's see. So Laura asks, what are you currently reading? And do you actually, I'm always curious, do you read much historical? I mean, except for us all here, we read it. Oh,
I
well,
just
thank you.
finished this over the weekend, and it was lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. That wasn't a plug, but I appreciate it.
Really, I finished it over the weekend. It was great.
She really did. She texted me earlier today. But yeah, what other books are people reading?
This is the one I'm going to read next.
Diane Freeman.
Oh, that one. Yeah, I've been looking at those. They look really good.
They are
The
fun.
series is really fun. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I just read the new C.S. Harris book, and what the Devil Knows, which was really good. And I'm reading Clara McKenna's book won't be out for a while. I'm reading it to give it a cover quote.
Yeah.
And it's really good.
I think you're on my second book or my first book. Of my new series. And I saw
She's on mine.
Ashley, and you were on Erica's first book. So you have done nicely with the cover quotes, which is awesome.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
It does take time, appreciate
Does.
that. Thank you.
I just read Olive Bright Pigeoneer by Stephanie Graves.
Oh yeah.
That one's a really fun one. She gets involved with World War II era and with her pigeons sending messages between England and France. So that was really fun. And I'm working on Anna Karenina.
Oh, wow.
I'm 500 pages in. So
Was that just
Wow.
like a dream to read it or
I have a friend every year in December, we get together and we make kind of like a New Year's resolutions list, and we go to the bookstore and we browse and we pick 5 classics we haven't read yet to make our goal for the new year. So
nice. That's good. I love
That's
that.
awesome.
Let's see. I have one more question. When you think about your main characters, what do they like to drink and eat? I'm always just, what are people eating in your books? What do they drink? What do they not like to drink and eat? Like, are there things? Do you think about that when you're writing, or you just have them drink tea or something, or like do you really like want them eating stuff, drinking stuff?
Not all of us are lucky enough to have a setting in a speakeasy.
Yeah, I know. It is why I like my
Great
cocktail
mixed
research. But I mean, like, do you, are there stuff they hate? Like what are they eating?
My people drink a lot of tea because they
mine
go to
too. Well, Amory drinks a lot of coffee. Amory likes coffee and Electra likes tea. So
Yeah.
I haven't thought too much beyond that, I guess.
It's okay.
Jane also drinks a lot of coffee, but she also drinks a lot of gin Rickies. No.
See, again, this is all about me. I just want crossover books. Like, so your character, I want them all hanging out and drinking their gin Rickies. I feel like we don't do enough crossover in series, across novelists. I don't think we do that enough. I feel like
I know the TV shows do it all the time. We need to do it.
I know it does. I feel like that needs to happen more. I think people would find that fun. Let's see. So there were 2 more questions here. So June asks, I'm just going to read her question. I find I research the true aspects that are incorporated in your stories and learn a lot about topics I would never have researched otherwise. Are you hoping people will do that when you're writing books? So I think it's like, are you hoping that when someone reads your book, they're going to say, oh, I really want to read more about the milk wars of, the late 19th century? Or like, do you hope that you're going to inspire someone to go and research the topic more?
I don't know that I consciously go into it thinking about that, but it is something I find myself doing a lot when I read other people's books. I'll be interested in something that they've written about or just mentioned, and then I'll go off on a Wikipedia tangent or whatever. But yeah, so I like the idea that people also do that when they read my books, that there's stuff in there that sparks interest.
Yeah, I think that's how I became a writer, because I was reading I was reading Westerns, like one a day for a while there. And I would read something, I think, wonder if that's how it really happened. And I go to the nonfiction section of the library and find out, read about it. So I know I do that in real life, in my life. And I guess I just assumed other readers do too sometimes, but I try to give people enough information that, that they feel like they know something about the topic. And if they're really interested, then they can learn more later. But I don't think that was uppermost in my mind, that people would be researching more. But it's cool to think they do.
Yeah, I think that's fun. And then Laura asks a question. Do you ever do a cover quote, a blurb for a book you didn't like? We'll probably say, remember you're being recorded.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna recommend it, usually it's something that I've enjoyed.
Yeah, I think I would say that's pretty common. Yeah. Just otherwise you probably would just not say, I have the time to work on it right now.
Although I do have a writer friend who's a New York Times bestselling author, and she told me one time years ago, she never, when her friends have a book that they ask her to blurb, she never reads it, because she's afraid if she doesn't like it, then she won't be able to give it a good quote. So
yeah, that's rough. Yeah.
Interesting.
And I know
that's of interest. So that could explain some cover quotes. Questioning them.
Well, I know we're kind of coming to the end here, but I was hoping everybody could just say something about what's upcoming next, or a little bit more about it if you've already talked about it. But like, what's next for you all?
Just have the first book, A Peculiar Combination, first Electra McDonald novel, coming out May 25th. So that's my newest thing.
Awesome.
I just turned
really
in
good
the second one recently. So
You did what? I'm sorry, Ashley.
I just turned in the second one recently.
Yay, that's exciting. Congrats.
Yeah, it's really good too. I've read it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but I also read it and really enjoyed it.
Oh, now you're just making me feel bad.
I know, I'm really sorry, but I really loved it.
Thank you.
Although we have to confess, what happens is, you read these books early to give them a cover quote, and then when the book comes out, I always get really excited. And then, oh, wait a minute, I already read that.
And my name is on the cover.
I don't have that pleasure looming before me anymore.
And Vicki, what's your next book?
My next book is City of Schemes, which will be out in the beginning of December. It's a counterfeit lady book, and it involves a crooked fortune teller, and Elizabeth is going to expose her and get back the money that she's cheated people out of.
That sounds fun. I love that, by the way, that we can say, hey, congratulations on your book that came out on Tuesday. What's next, Vicki? It's so ridiculous. Can't you just enjoy the moment of having your book out this week? But of course, that's the thing, right? And Erica, and your third book will be coming out. Same, I know your book just came out. Now we have a next one, but tell us about your third in the series.
So second one just came out. Third one is set on a transatlantic cruise and definitely deals with some gaslighting and also a Nazi spy.
And does that one have a name yet, or does it have a title?
Here's the thing. I think it's going to be, I gave it a different name, but I am pretty sure it would wager money that it's going to be called Murder on the Atlantic. I turned it in with a different name. I think it's going to be a Murder on the Atlantic.
Oh, all right. Well, that sounds cool. Yeah,
sure.
Awesome. Great. Well, I think we're we got through all the reader questions. I think I haven't seen any more pop in theirs for Ozback. So yeah, it was very fun.
Yes, so thank you everyone for joining us. It was really, oh my God, it was great hearing about your work, and I love just seeing how you admire each other's work. So that was just really fun to see. And we had such a nice turnout tonight. So thank you to everyone at home who joined us. And I hope you saw the link for the book bin. If you're interested in getting a copy of any of these books, it's in the chat. And yeah, just best of luck to all of you with your new books. We'll be looking forward to reading them. So have a good night, everybody.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.